Who wants 2020 to be over?
That's
Pretty much the majority of people in the audience. All right.
Oh, my. Well, welcome to Answers News. We got Brian Osborne, Dr. Jennifer Rivera, and I'm Bodie Hodge. We're going to be your host today, and hopefully we can have a great time. We've got some interesting news items. We got some strange news items, all sorts of things. And I don't know if the mics can pick it up, but they might actually hear some thunder, because it is rumbling all around us right now. Makes you feel like we're in a global flood, doesn't it? You know?
That's the special effects of the ark all the way here, right? Yes,
that's right.
Coming all the way down.
Maybe they should pump those in here every once in a while, just mess with us. But yeah, we're here at the Creation Museum. People should be watching us in various parts of the world. I know people are hopping on here already, just seeing people come from all over the country. So it really is exciting.
Hey, if you want to comment, I'll be following the Answers in Genesis Facebook page. I think Dr. Rivera has the Ken Ham page, and then
I got YouTube right now.
All right, yep.
And you know, there's always tons of different comments, and of course, we can't always see all of them. We're flipping through from time to time, but it'll be exciting. Do we have any announcements? I know some things are coming up educationally wise.
Yes. So our Explore Days, which are our one-day educational programs that we offer here at the Creation Museum, are going to be going live within the next few days. Hopefully by this weekend, those registrations will be open.
That's exciting.
So yes, we've had a lot of requests. We're excited,
Yep.
and we are going to have our very first Explore Day at the Ark this year too.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so definitely check back at the website. And our high school labs, those registrations are open. So biology is full, but we do have room in chemistry and forensic science. So definitely encourage you if you're looking for
I know a lot of homeschool
options.
students do this. A lot of Christian schools will bring their kids. So, I mean, they're really good. So
you're probably biased towards the forensic, though,
Just
right?
a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Dr. Rivera is our forensics expert here. And I remember the first time that I met you, you were talking about fingerprints, and it was just, it was absolutely fascinating.
It is, yeah. Just an article in the Answers magazine about koala fingerprints, right?
Yes.
So forth, yeah. Very cool.
So I got excited about our first article today.
Look at that transit. Look at that segue.
I'm telling you, it's like
professional, right?
Did you plan that? I'm impressed. All right.
So, you taking it away?
Okay, yeah.
You want to start with this one?
All right, sure. All right, so koala visits Lightning Company warehouse. So this was kind of neat because as someone who studied koala fingerprints, I was kind of excited to see this, where a koala just happened to randomly go into the warehouse of this lighting company and just kind of crawl around and hang out. And they took pictures of him. So, of course, my first...
has to be Australia, of course.
My first question was, didn't someone go and process his fingerprints after he touched all that stuff?
Was he stealing something? Was he a burglar?
He was in there.
Because I would have loved to have seen his fingerprint patterns. So,
actually, they got some nice pictures of it.
They really
did.
Screen there. Yep.
When I was in Australia, my wife and I, we had the opportunity to hold some koalas. It was kind of neat. And, did you get to do that when you were in Australia?
We did. Well, since I'm controlling the slides today, I just plugged in a picture of my family in Australia, my wife and my son Ian holding a koala just a few months ago, and they are really, really soft. They really are. They got sharp claws, kind of hurts, but my wife was really happy. And my son Ian was too. But
that's a sight you probably don't normally see. They're probably like, how did he get in here in the first place?
Well, I'm kind of wondering why he was there. What was he looking for?
Oh, he was looking for enlightenment. He went to a lighting company. Come on. I want you to know, my jokes are not always that good, but that was a good one.
They're just not that bright, right? And so we can just keep going. I'm sorry. I apologize to my wife watching. All right. Moving on.
All right. So our rich history, Ice Age glaciers shaped the site of Newport, which actually is not far from here. Climate change will always have an impact. So, of course, we always have to go back to climate change in these articles. But
just so people know, Newport is right across from Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's right here. So.
It's right here in this tri-state area. And we're literally on the boundary of the maximum peak of where the glaciers, so the ice actually have hit. And it's interesting because creationists and evolutionists actually agree pretty much on the extent of the Ice Age and a lot of those types of things. Of course, we disagree on the Ice Age overall. They have a whole bunch of them going back millions of years, where we have one major ice age that was triggered by the flood.
Yep.
So, I guess they did some studying on some of the landscape here. And you can see on the map, they have certain rivers and certain areas, and these were then formed and pushed and moved to what we currently have today. So This is neat stuff. You can actually go out and observe some of this. And so we actually like some of this research.
Yeah, they actually described how the Ohio River was formed and some of the drainage that was carved out. So.
And why it's so muddy.
Right.
No, that wasn't in there. But anyway, but I mean, we agree with the facts of the movement of the glaciers, the oscillations going back and forth, the features left by the movement of the glaciers. That's all observable. But the interpretation of when those things occurred, the time frame, that's of course what we disagree on.
Right, and we're in that area where it kind of would go back and forth because we're right on that borderline of it. Yeah. Yep. So sometimes it's progressing, other times it's retreating, and so we see some of these different effects in here, which is kind of neat. Now, here's something that's interesting though. From a biblical viewpoint, we have creation, we have the fall, we have the flood.
Yep.
The flood then triggers an ice age. The flood caused unique conditions. With the flood, you've got continents shifting and rearranging and moving. That's going to heat things up. There's going to be a lot of volcanism. Those are ideal conditions to have an ice age. Just to give you an idea, out in the secular world, trying to understand conditions for an ice age has actually been very difficult. They don't have a mechanism for it.
Right.
And they really struggle with that because if you just cool down the earth, you don't get an ice age. You just get a cold globe.
You need warm oceans as well.
That's
at the
the
same
key.
time.
You need warm oceans and cool summers. And so if you think about continental shifting and things like that and a lot of volcanism, that heats up your ocean, which gives a lot more accumulation, a lot more snow in the wintertime, for example. And then having cool summers, it doesn't warm up enough to melt it all off. And so it leaves a certain amount. So the following year, it builds up and it builds up, and then it compacts into glaciers and things like that. So the flood actually gives really good conditions for that.
It really does.
Obviously, it's got the warm oceans, but where do the cool summers come from?
Well, of course, the Bible says that when the flood occurred, the fountains of the great deep burst forth. This is literally cracking the crust of the earth and moving the Earth's crust catastrophically. And this causes tons of volcanic activity.
Right.
Shooting
particularly
dust and
the end
aerosols.
stages of the flood too.
Exactly right.
With the mountain
Absolutely.
buildings and things like that.
We see signs of that all throughout the geological record, right?
And what we found when we've observed certain mountains, volcanoes that really blow its top, it leaves little particulates up in the upper atmosphere that just linger there for years and years.
Yep.
And what those do, they actually reflect some of the sunlight back, and it actually cools off the globe a little bit.
So, end result of the flood, cooler continents, warmer oceans, exactly what you need for a post-flood ice age.
Right. So it's going to get up to a peak, and then it's going to retreat. So we expect this. So this is kind of neat. When I see research like this, it's like, wow, creationists and evolutionists can go side by side on this. Where we'll disagree, though, is the timing. In the secular world, they want to throw out all sorts of long-age timings and things like that, and that's really where we would disagree on those sorts of things. In fact, we've got a couple of books here. You guys didn't know I had two sitting up here. The first one, Mike Ord, we call him Mr. Ice Age. He's an Ice Age expert. He's got a book called Frozen in Time. He's looking at woolly mammoths, looking at the Ice Age, different climate models and things like that. And he goes through a lot of the data in here. This is written at a layman's perspective. So, I mean, even teenagers could grab this book, read it, and get a good understanding of the biblical post-flood Ice Age, as well as an understanding of mammoths and things like that. At the same time, we also have a book called Thousands, Not Billions. And this is a summary book of immense amounts of radioisotope research. Radioisotopes in the age of the Earth, the RATE group, a number of creation ministries. I know ICR was involved in that, Creation Research Society. A number of people were involved in that. What Dr. Don DeYoung does is he takes their research, these two large volumes, and he summarizes it in an easier to read fashion. And it takes a look at things like carbon dating and radiometric dating and some of the problems with that.
Yeah, both good resources.
Both are good.
By the way, at both attractions, the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum have some incredible exhibits on the Ice Age.
Yes.
Really well done.
The
By
Ice
the
Age,
way,
as well as radiometric dating even. We chat about that a bit.
and then Carrie here on Facebook says, my kids have watched Buddy Davis's Ice Age video millions of times.
There you go.
Yeah, so you can see that resource as well
Buddy's
for
a
the
lot
kids.
of fun. Kids absolutely
love
love
Buddy.
Buddy. He's a country music musician, and he's also a dinosaur sculptor.
Oh,
remember the
really good at
dinosaurs you
both.
see here at the museum or the Ark? Buddy had a
Shout
hand
out to
in
Buddy
that.
if you're watching. All right, moving on.
Okay. Victory. U.S. Navy reverses unlawful order banning troops from indoor mass religious services. So this is kind of disappointing that the U.S. military, the Navy, would actually ban our officers from having indoor religious services, but that has been overturned, so that's the good news.
Yeah, the sad part is they had to get attorneys involved
Right,
and that
had to
sort
get
of thing.
attorneys involved.
One of the things that got me, and the article says this, I'm going to read this here. It says, on June 24th, the Navy issued an order banning troops from attending indoor religious services, although other activities such as mass transit, hosting social gatherings of any size, and participation in protests were all permitted. you could do all those things, but you couldn't go and have, assemble into religious services.
And especially to those in the military, if there's something they don't need so desperately, it's hope that can only be found in Jesus Christ.
Which is essential.
Essential.
By definition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For
it really
mental
is.
health and all that, absolutely. So.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. I've got a lot of friends and family who've been in the military. I've got great respect for them. My father served. And, I absolutely love a lot of our servicemen and the sacrifice that they've done. And, a lot of times, I go out of my way to say, hey, thanks, for their service. But at the same time, one of the things you see over and over again, there's an immense amount of suicide from a lot of these soldiers who've come back from war-torn areas. And I would suggest one of the reasons for that is because a lot of these guys have been influenced by a secular worldview. They're taught there's no God, there's no right and wrong. When you die, you're dead. Nothing ultimately matters. And here they are fighting for a country. They see all sorts of horrible things when they're in battle and war, or even just trying to protect things in certain countries. They come back and they don't know how to deal with that. See, that's where a biblical worldview, understanding that people do have value. They're made in the image of God. They're sinners. They're in need of Jesus Christ. I'll tell you what, it changes your whole mindset.
Well, Bodie, and to your point, if you look at the rates of suicide throughout the U.S., they are spiking in the last couple of generations.
They really have been.
Because of this influence of a secular ideology. Because if there is no God and there are no absolutes and this life is it, what hope do you have past this world? And if your life is terrible here, why care about it at all, especially for the future, if there is no future? And so you see the connections between how you think and how you live. Worldviews have consequences. Ideas have consequences.
I do like what they said at the end. Our sailors and Marines offer their lives to protect religious liberty. They should be able to exercise those rights as well.
Yeah, that's good.
So good.
I mean,
one thing that I saw in here, they say, overstepping of military personnel's freedom to worship. Now, I see that more and more where people are saying freedom of worship, freedom of worship. Do you realize freedom of worship is different from freedom of religion? It is the Constitution that says, hey, you have freedom of religion, which is a whole encompassing set of your belief systems, and to be able to act on those and do that. Worship is just one small set of that. So you got to be careful. Even when people are saying, oh, they're all for freedom of worship, that doesn't necessarily mean they're for freedom of religion. So you have to make a distinction between that sometimes when people are talking about it.
By the way, the popular secular definition for freedom of worship is that you are free to worship in your house of worship one day a week or whatever, and you're free to think what you want to think in your own mind, in your own home. Yeah. So you can think what you want to think in your mind, in your home. Don't make it public. Worship in your house of worship one time a week or whatever. Do you realize that version of freedom of religion, that's the version of freedom of religion around the world that China practices, that North Korea practices?
Oh, a lot of Islamic nations practice. Christians are not allowed to have their religion
of freedom of worship.
Out in the open. Yeah.
But our Constitution gives us freedom of exercise of religion. You can live according to the tenets of your religion Monday through Sunday. That's what our, praise God, our Constitution allows for, but many are fighting against, unfortunately.
Right.
all right, secular group critical of churches taking PPP loans admits to also taking under $500,000. So
this was kind of fun, yeah.
Yeah, Donald Trump signed the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act on Friday, April 24th. And what that basically means, it was a loan to small businesses. If you had under 500 employees, it would guarantee 8 weeks of payroll so that basically your business could stay afloat and you'd be able to pay your employees. And it is, you're supposed to qualify for 100% loan forgiveness if you follow and meet those standards outlined in that particular legislation. And so what happened is nonprofit religious organizations were able to qualify for that.
Many churches.
Right, churches, if you had under 500 employees. But then we had some secular groups, right, who complained that the churches were getting that money.
How dare churches be able to get this?
But then they applied
we
for it themselves.
We should be able to give this to every religion but those Christians, you know, which is...
But then they were, you know, benefactors of it as well. So we definitely see hypocrisy
Most people don't realize this. Secular groups, atheistic groups, they're religious groups too. So that's what made this interesting when they're sitting there like, you religious groups shouldn't be able to get this sort of thing. But at the same time, they, as a religious organization, were getting the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a double standard, really.
Several $100,000 they received.
Yeah, they sure did.
It's interesting. What we see with a secular ideology, secular worldview, it is consistently inconsistent. All right, they tend
That's
to
the
be
one thing they are
critical.
consistent on.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Way to be consistent. All right, yeah.
Yeah, but a number of these organizations, Freedom from Religion Foundation, it's an atheistic organization. We also had the American Humanist Association, American Atheists, Center for Inquiry. You know, a number of these guys were
And
able
Planned
to go out and
Parenthood
get
as
the
well.
same thing that churches
Yeah.
were. Now, what's interesting about Planned Parenthood is they were bigger than 500 people.
Over
Over
16,000
16,000
They weren't
employees.
qualified, and
Right.
somehow they were able to get it. It
Over
became
40
big news
Planned
items.
Parenthood facilities received funding.
Well, they applied as affiliates in
Right,
local
so they-
areas.
right.
That's how they got it. But technically, they're one large
One
organization.
large organization, right.
And by the way,
Yeah.
that's your tax dollars going to fund abortion.
Abortion.
In that
Yep.
case.
Yeah, it's sad to see that sort of thing. So.
All right, so 15-foot long skeleton of an extinct dolphin suggests parallel evolution among whales.
All right. Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's in Science
so-
Daily.
Lots of assumptions, once again, in this article, as we find, with articles trying to, relate different animal species to evolutionary theory. But, whales and dolphins in this category are from the same kind, we would say, biblical
Yeah.
created kind. They're cetaceans. And so, to some extent, we would expect to see some similarity in their design because they're in the same created kind.
Well, made by the
That's
same
important.
designer to live in a
Right,
common
same
environment
designer to live in the
the
same
water
environment.
with similar traits. And they do have similar traits in many things compared to whales and the dolphins of what we see now. It's interesting. They said beforehand they had just a fragment, piece of a fossil to identify this particular species. Now they found a whole specimen and they know exactly what it is. And that's what you typically find in the fossil record. If you find a fragment of something, a piece of a skull bone, then it's wide open to interpretation. Maybe it's half this, half that. But if you find the whole fossil or the majority of the fossil, it's clearly either a dolphin or a whale and nothing in between, right?
What is
Yeah.
funny is they actually say here, though, they said that they were surprised by the common ancestor and the evolving traits in both groups, right? But we would expect to see similarity, and it doesn't surprise us because
Not
we
at all.
recognize that God created them with exactly what they needed to survive in their environment.
But
so.
it's a surprise for them because these features between this particular dolphin and the other whales they're looking at, they're very similar features, but in evolutionary thinking, they don't have a recent common ancestor. So why do they have these very similar features? Well, they suggest here parallel evolution or convergent evolution, that these very distinct traits evolved separately in different species in different places, yet they look very similar.
So not only did it have to evolve once all
By
by
dumb
itself,
luck,
it had to
right?
do it twice.
And the
or
same way,
more.
too. Right, in two
The
different
dumb luck that this would actually happen. It's a dolphin. It's a big dolphin. That's what it is.
Yep.
And we have variations within the dolphin kind. That includes your false killer whales and things like that. They can ultimately interbreed with each other. So you can get wolfins and things like that, which is kind of neat too. So look up wolfins. They're like big dolphins that look half like
Not a
killer
wolf
whales.
and a dolphin, no, just be
Yeah,
clear,
wolf
right?
is that sort of
No
thing.
whale and a dolphin, yeah.
So now a false killer whale or those types of things, they are not whales like a baleen whale or a blue whale, things like that. Those are totally a different kind. But it's a big one. It's pretty neat just when you think about it.
I love one of the concluding statements of this particular article. It said this, that whales and dolphins have a complicated and long evolutionary history, and at a glance, you may not get that impression from modern day species, to which I would agree. I don't get the impression they evolved over time, right?
Yep. Once again, this is a neat find, but they're off on their timing. They want to say, oh, this is 25 million years ago, and they're dead wrong on their time. Because God created everything just a matter of thousands of years ago, which isn't a problem for an all-powerful God. He rested on the seventh day. What we're finding in
These are
here
made on day
is
5, right?
right.
Sea creatures, yep.
This is sediment laid down since creation, so it's not a problem seeing this sort of thing in here. Once again, it goes back to the time issue, and once again, this book is pretty powerful.
Very
on that.
helpful.
Hey, I got a comment that I got to read. I saw this and I'm like, I've got to read this. Someone says here, I used to be religiously atheist. I tried to convert the Christians at my school to atheism. Isn't that interesting when you
What our
think
culture's
about that?
doing.
And that kind of stuff
At
happened a
large.
lot. I grew up in state schools. I went to church and I went to state schools.
So did I.
And, I don't know how many times I was taught a secular worldview and atheistic worldview. I see some of the younger generation out here out here sitting in the pews, and many of you probably have gone to state schools. Have you guys ever been taught things like Big Bang, millions of years, evolutionary ideas? Have you guys seen? So, yeah, you guys are nodding your heads. Of course you have. That is actually you being indoctrinated into a secular worldview, a secular religion. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So we want to encourage people to get answers and be discerning on these things because we're hit with it left, right, and center.
And by the way, there are answers, and the answers aren't that hard if we'll start with a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
Truly, you start with the Bible, you really do have answers.
I mean, they both require faith, right?
They do.
Absolutely.
They absolutely do.
So it's definitely a religion in and of itself. Yeah.
We got to get to the next article, though.
I know this one. Right? Yes. Well, let me see if I can read it with a straight face. Alien civilizations could move their star to avoid a cosmic disaster.
Okay, so this is a New Scientist and not in like a Star Trek magazine,
a movie
right?
or the Babylon Bee.
This
or
was by a Yale professor, all right, who came up with this idea that aliens could move their star if they thought that they were going to be in danger of extinction, or it's going to be involved in eliminating the planet. And so what he basically said is you would require a large structure weighing at least a fifth the mass of our moon, as close as 10,000 kilometers from the star.
Which the sun's pretty hot, right? So you're going to need some pretty substantial materials to withstand that heat.
Which kind of goes back to the space elevator he talks to in just a minute.
And they say if you do it right, you can accelerate up to speeds of 0.1% the speed of light in 5,300 years. So if you need to get out of the way of something in a hurry, in 5,300 years, you can move a little.
Yeah.
So you need this star tug, he calls it the star tug.
A star tug.
To move, yes, move the planet.
This is 100% pure fictional story stuff that's going on here.
Yes.
And we didn't quite get to the application. Here, he made an application. He said, okay, if aliens could do this and move their star, then maybe we could observe them moving their star, and that could be proof for their
how we can detect
existence.
Them.
Right, because that was
and
the
so
goal.
he's advocating
was to
for
see
that
if we
as a
can look
possibility.
for it and find it, right?
Correct.
And
So
verify it. Yeah.
Yep.
So imagine going out here being like, let's go rope our sun and move it somewhere. Whole solar system and all, come with you.
He said you could actually move it to another galaxy.
Right, move it to a whole other galaxy.
Move it to a whole new galaxy. Yeah.
But you would have to deplete your sun pretty good to do that.
And here's the thing, honestly, you read this article and it's very easy to kind of have little chuckles as kind of go through the crowd, right, as I hear them. We do chuckle to ourselves. But the guy's a smart guy. He's not dumb. And by the way, it's being consistent with his worldview. You see, in the evolutionary worldview, we've been here for billions of years. Life evolved by chance on Earth, surely evolved by chance somewhere else a long time ago. So surely there are aliens somewhere else in the universe, much older and wiser than we. They have technology far beyond us, so they could probably do something like this, and we could detect them if they did it, and that could be proof for aliens. I would suggest to you, he's being consistent with his worldview. It's just that he has the wrong worldview. He should trust God's word over man's. You start with the wrong assumptions, you'll most likely get the wrong conclusions, even if you're intellectually smart. Right?
Yep, and that's the case. As soon as you reject God, almost anything goes, and you can see that in this particular article.
By the way, I have to give another shout out here. Again, David from Australia is watching. Hey, David, hope you're doing well, mate. Friend over there in Queensland area. And many other people, too, from all over the place chiming in from on the Answers Facebook page. So feel free to do so if you're wanting to do that as well.
Yeah, somebody chimes in here. So the problem with this article is that they never proved that alien civilizations actually exist.
Yes.
I guess that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so our next article, High Court rules Christian adoption charity must allow same-sex carers. And so this takes place in the United Kingdom, who we know is becoming ever more secular, far ahead of us, we would say, in secular legislation, but I would say we're probably not far behind them. We can often look to Europe and get an idea of what it's going to look like in America here in a very short time.
But if we don't repent.
That's right.
The Cornerstone Adoption and Fostering Service was trying to, require, because they're a Christian agency, that only parents, in our traditional biblical setting would be permitted to adopt children. And the High Court just said they had breached the 2010 Equality Act in the United Kingdom, and therefore they could no longer refrain from offering adoptions to homosexual couples.
And by the way, it's not like there were other outlets that homosexuals could go to adopt. I'm sure they had
There's plenty of them.
Right? There's plenty of those.
So they're attacking
targeting
the Christians.
They're targeting this one, right?
Who, their mission was to place children with Christian families who are wanting to do this. And so now they're attacked, and that's what's going on. The UK has become very much paganized.
Oh, yeah.
English mythology dominates there. What I mean by English mythology is the worldview of Darwin. What Darwin was teaching, Darwinism, an evolutionary worldview, it's not new. Darwin didn't come up with it. His grandfather believed it, Erasmus Darwin. Jean Lamarck believed it long before Darwin.
The Greeks
but where did they get their, yeah, they got it all the way back from the Greeks. The Epicureans were the first evolutionists. That's one of the Greek mythology groups.
Oh, yeah.
They believed that there was no God, that everything evolved from tiny particles called atoms. That's where we get our modern term atom.
Yeah.
And so it's a form of paganism, and that has dominated England. And so here's what they're doing. They're bowing down to that religion. You must bow down to that. Sexual sin, all sorts of things like that go.
Yeah.
And you Christians, you're the bad guys, and you're the ones under attack. And that's what we're seeing over in the UK right now.
Well, because the morality has shifted.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they say in the article that all of these Christian organizations are slowly getting squeezed out of the public square. They're getting eliminated one by one because they can no longer meet the legislation that's mandated.
Do they have freedom of religion over there in light of this? No, they don't. They're now forced to
practice a secular humanistic religion
from a secular humanistic perspective, and that's what the High Court claimed. And what basis did the High Court justice say for this? All they said is, it hardly needs to be said, but I categorically reject any suggestion that gay men and lesbians cannot make wonderful, loving, foster, and adoptive parents. So all he's doing is appealing to himself. That's humanism right there. They basically said, we don't care about God. We don't care about his word. They're not even going to acknowledge him.
He's appealing to himself as the authority. And here's my question to him or to those who had that same view. Where would they draw the line?
I know.
Because I wonder if he would say, well, rapists should be allowed to adopt kids. No problem there. Or pedophiles or a known murderer. They should be allowed to adopt. Surely he draws a line somewhere. My question is where and by what authority do you draw that line? He's doing it by his own arbitrary thinking, which is totally arbitrary because someone else has a different viewpoint. They have a different viewpoint. Who's the ultimate authority? If there is no God, there is no absolute authority. Therefore, morality is relative and anything goes. Like we see happening throughout the world.
I think that says that in the Bible too, right?
I think so. That's exactly right.
Hey, Brian, you know what I realized? You didn't click the thing.
I was doing so good.
Now we've officially got to the article.
But see, I'm a guy doing two things at once is really hard. All right. So
we don't let him
and
chew
clicking a button,
either.
that's
He's going to
really
fall
tough.
down. Actually, inside the article, though, there's I highlighted another article.
I saw that,
where it says, gay man murdered 18-month-old just weeks after formal adoption with husband. So here we have a high court justice saying, I don't see why these guys can't be loving. And then there's that. But here's the thing. As soon as you reject God's word, why not murder? Why not lie? Why not cheat?
Abortion.
Why not torture? Why not have slavery? Why not have all sorts of different things? See, those are principles that come from God and his word.
Oh, yeah.
To be loving to your child, that's a Christian principle. Do you realize that?
Oh, yeah.
So see, it's just a double standard. As soon as you throw the Bible out, and yet they still expect people to be loving and caring to children. Why?
Sure. But we've only given at least one more article before we run out of time, right?
All right, Jurassic Park.
And I clicked the slide.
Clicked
it. It's right there.
Got nearly everything wrong about the Dilophosaurus. The new study says, of course, we're not surprised, right? Because it is just a Hollywood movie. And we were talking earlier, Brian, you were mentioning how the people they consulted to even, construct the dinosaurs in the film were...
Well, they were scientists based on evolutionary worldview, given their suggestions, right?
Right. So they're saying the Dilophosaurus in the movie was much smaller than it actually appears to be able to grow to based on fossil evidence. It can be about 20 feet in length, they're saying. And of course, they had to...
See, I still have no problem with the smaller ones because they could have been younger ones.
Right.
Yeah, juveniles, that sort of thing.
Right. But of course, they had to say, right?
Oh, they're more like birds.
They're more like birds than we thought, right?
Has to be in there somewhere, right?
Always
See, because that's part of the narrative. They want dinosaurs to evolve into birds, so all of a sudden, all these different dinosaurs, they're going to try to make them look more and more like birds.
And they said from the fossil evidence, we now know it had stronger jaws than presented, it had unique features, much bigger, as you mentioned before. And it's interesting, I want you to note in the article, one of the researchers said this: until this study, nobody knew what the Dilophosaurus looked like or how it evolved. So evidently, now they know how it evolved. Go through the entire article, they have no idea how it evolved. Significant evolutionary gaps still exist, and we don't know the closest relatives to the Dilophosaurus.
Yeah, it just shows up.
You got to read these articles very carefully. Watch out for the bait and switch, happens all the time, or the overstatement in the title.
But here's another thing. People need to be very careful about going to Hollywood to understand things about say dinosaurs
No,
or even Christianity.
Bodie, tell me it's not so.
Okay, so they have these big velociraptors chasing people around in the movies. Velociraptors are only about yay tall. They're not very tall at all, very small. So it just gives you a taste that they really exaggerate certain things. So you have to be careful.
That can't be true, though.
Yeah, no.
All right,
we
we're
got
going to try
time
and
for more.
squeeze this one in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
we
let's
got
go
time.
for it.
I used to work at Planned Parenthood, and here's how I know it's crumbling from the inside.
This will be good news.
This was interesting because after only 8 months as CEO, her name was Leanna Wen, was asked to, basically she was voted out as the CEO of Planned Parenthood and replaced by Alexis
And
McGill
they've gone through a
Johnson.
number of CEOs
A number.
here
There's-
recently.
It's like almost a revolving door at Planned Parenthood.
For those of you who don't know, Planned Parenthood is one of the leading abortion providers in this country. I think they are the leading
Almost
abortion provider.
350,000 babies murdered in their mother's womb last year by Planned
Just from
Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood.
And here's the question, well, why was she voted out? All right, well, she happened to have a miscarriage, and she, was vocal about the miscarriage and was clear that she had, her unborn baby was a child, all right? She admitted, she talked about that in the article she published, and that her son had lost a sibling.
Yeah.
Well, if
You're
you're
referred to
working
as a
for
human
Planned
being.
Parenthood as a CEO, you cannot acknowledge
Cardinal
the
sin.
unborn as a child.
Yep.
Right.
So she was gone.
She was gone.
And so we
Even
see
though
this
she
constant
recognized
rotation
that.
of leadership in the organization, which shows there's
Yeah.
no consistency in their thinking of where they're going, and that they are crumbling to some degree, and we would pray they would crumble from the inside out. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
and that's what they're saying. They're saying, if you keep seeing all this leadership change, not just there, but even at some of the local ones, over
Yep.
and over, the turnover, which is showing that they are having a huge problem there too.
And I think we have time for the last one.
Let's go ahead and do the last
Look
one.
at that.
Rainbow bees.
Gorgeous
This is
images,
is pretty, right?
yes. The Australian rainbow bee, all right, just beautiful.
Forget murder hornets.
That's a-
Check that baby
Right.
out.
That's right. Exactly. It's gorgeous. That's the real picture, real bee. That's its real colors.
Yeah, and what's really neat is, bees are equipped with like pollen baskets on their legs, so they're able to collect pollen, and this bee is one of the major pollinators, for Australia and Asia.
Of course, it's Australia. Everything
Right.
cool is
Yeah.
in Australia, right?
Now, they're
Koalas,
winged
kangaroos.
creatures, so they would have been made on day 5.
Day 5.
Yep.
Yep. And, they're on Australia. I know throughout the article they're arguing where did they evolve from and that sort of thing.
Right.
They're created by God. Look how, that's just an amazing creature. And they work in a hive system. It's just incredible.
Think about it. This is a bee, a small insect that God cares so much about his creation. He gave it that sort of beauty. Right? And it just reminds you of how incredible our God is, how much he cares about the details. And if he cares about bees, how much does he care about us? One little quick little thing, I got to show off my mom's plant. I was at my parents' house in North Carolina last week, and she had this beautiful hibiscus flower. And the day I got there, it just bloomed, as you can see, and it was gorgeous. And then the next day, it was literally gone. The petals have fallen off. And it made me think about the verse in the Bible. God cares about the flowers. They bloom today, they're gorgeous, and yet they fade by the next day. If he cares so much about the flowers, how much more does he care about us as human beings made in his image? And we can lean on that. Even in these times of horrible desperation during COVID-19 and the attacks of the government on religious freedoms, we can trust our God has our best interest at heart. Take note from the flower, from the bee. Put your faith in him. He loves
Hey, let
you.
me ask you, those bees can sting, right?
I think they can, yeah.
That's probably why the koala went in the warehouse. All right.
On that note,
We're
I'm
out of
sorry.
God bless you all and thanks for tuning in.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
See you.